Standards are fundamental there. It's not going to solve all the world's problems related to patient safety, but it's helping kind of create that fundamental platform for manufacturers, healthcare organizers, people to work off of in order to build stronger and better systems.
BSI presents The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards with Matthew Childs and Cindy Parakill. Today's episode is for World Patient Safety Day.
Hello and welcome to The Standard Show. My name is Matthew Childs and the aim of this podcast is to bring you the stories behind the standards. Now, over the past year or so here on The Standard Show, we have celebrated or marked a number of different international days. World Standards Day, obviously, 14th of October in case you were wondering, get that marked on your calendar. But others too, like World Consumer Rights Day and World Bee Day. There was a nice buzz around that particular episode. Now, we are publishing this episode around the time of another World Day that you might not be that familiar with, and that is World Patient Safety Day. World Patient Safety Day is one of the World Health Organization's 11 global public health days. Established only in 2019, the idea behind this particular day is to increase public awareness and engagement and understanding of patient safety, and to work towards what it describes as global solidarity and action by World Health Organization member states to promote patient safety. And so, to help explore some of the relationship between patient safety and standards, you'll hear two conversations. The first is with Suzy Broadbent, National Investigator at the Healthcare Safety Investigation Branch, or the HSIB, a relatively new organisation in the healthcare sector in the UK, in which she describes her role and that of the HSIB to discover not the whodunit, but the whydunit in terms of problems that can lead to issues of patient safety. And the second is with Lena Cordie-Bancroft from BSI, who played us in at the top of the episode. And in my conversation with Lena, she describes the relationship between HSIB, BSI and standards, and about how standards provide solutions for some of the patient safety issues that the HSIB investigates and reports on. Lena also describes her standards journey, which it turns out is a transatlantic romance. Now, although this is a Matthew without Cindy episode, here is Cindy with a quick reminder.
This is Cindy Parakill with a quick reminder that here on The Standard Show, we really welcome your feedback. Please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts, especially if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Find and follow us on Twitter at Standard Show and on Instagram at The Standard Show. And check out the show notes for all of the ways to get in touch.
A psychologist by background, Suzy Broadbent is a chartered ergonomist and human factors specialist, and one of 15 national investigators of the Healthcare Safety Investigation Branch. Formed in 2017, the role of the HSIB is to improve patient safety through independent investigations into NHS-funded care across England. It's funded by the Department of Health and Social Care and currently hosted by NHS England. Their investigations focus on systems and processes in healthcare, identifying the factors that could have led or could potentially lead to patient harm. It does this without looking to attribute blame or liability, but instead to promote learning across the NHS. I started by asking Suzy about where the organisation fits into the healthcare system.
So where it fits is this idea of learning across the system as a whole. So where we fit at the moment, we're hosted by NHSE, but in the future, the bill that's just gone through Parliament, we're going to become more of an arm's length body, reporting directly into the department. So we've got more regulatory powers so that we can get more involved in that. Instead of, just making local recommendations, we can actually make them system-wide. So the idea is that it's not for blame. We don't apportion blame. We don't go, looking for, it's not like I think often if people think of an investigation, they think of, that the idea, especially if you think in terms of the police and things like that, you're trying to find a who done it, whereas we're very much looking at a why done it, and what learning can we have at a higher level across the system that might prevent not just one incident happening again, but multiple incidents happening again.
So it's interesting. So in a sense, you're making no judgment about what actually happened. You're just investigating why, and in order to prevent it
Yeah.
happening again.
Exactly. That's exactly what we do. And, often, if people get called to, talk to us as part of an investigation, they might be quite wary. But once they've spoken to us for a bit and, we start to ask them about, what circumstances were you working under? What was the system like going on? What was, your staffing levels like? What was going on in the wider world? And trying to understand all those influences that do influence us as humans. And, we are fallible. That's in our very nature. And starting to pull those things apart. And often I think people forget to talk to the people at the sharp end of like, what would make your life better? What could have prevented this? What could help you do your job easier? And when you start to get into those conversations, they're the best people to ask about the system. They're the ones who are doing it day in, day out. They know, we know what the policies say, we know what the guidelines say, but when you actually go in and speak to the people who are doing it on the ground, you get that idea of, work as actually done, as opposed to what we term work as imagined, if you just went and look at all the guidelines and things. So yeah, it's understanding those pressures that people are under in the system we make them work within, the organisation, the equipment they use, all those kind of things that can have a bearing on how well you complete your task.
And so who are you doing? Who's the client here? Who are doing this on behalf of?
We're doing this on behalf of the NHS and the health, on behalf of the Department of Health, essentially. It's part of the patient safety agenda. It is just an impartial body almost who can come in and do these no blame style investigations, which I say are modelled on what other industries have done to really improve their safety culture, to be able to get under the bonnet of things that maybe people wouldn't admit or be able to challenge at local level.
So prior then to you being created, back in 2017, how was this work being undertaken?
So it was predominantly being undertaken at a local level by local trusts. So lots of areas were learning almost the same issues over and over again, and learning them independently when they each struck the issues. But I think there was a lot of a change in the understanding of patient safety. I mean, patient safety has obviously been an issue for a really long period of time, but it's not necessarily as noticeable as it is in things like air accidents. It's not, a massive air crash that kills 500 people. It's kind of more insidious and more individual than that. But as people started to see the benefits of reporting systems such as this in other industries, that decision was taken to do one in health. And there had been previous bodies like the National Patient Safety Agency and things like that had started some of this work, definitely.
No, it's funny that you talk there. Obviously, we to the heart of the issue here. We're talking about patient safety. I just wonder, how does the HSIB? How do you approach the issue of patient safety? What's your approach?
Our approach is very much a human factors approach. It's all very much about what we can learn and change in the system. Very few people, luckily, in healthcare go in to make mistakes and injure people. They're all there to help people get better. So we take that almost as our, these people don't want to have patient safety issues. People want the patients to be fine. What can we do to help them? So it's very much that understanding, and that no blame is really at the fore of it, but it's that just culture. Obviously, that if there are certain things that people have done wrong, that's not for us, that's for a different approach. For us, it's a get that learning and get it across the system. So in terms of human factors, I'm talking about the things that do make us fallible, the things that we know about humans from psychology and from other biology and other things. We know what humans are good at and we know what we're bad at, and how do we design that appropriately. So we're trying to understand what conditions the people involved in that incident were working under, what equipment were they given to use, what kind of things can we change that could have prevented that happening, and learn across the system.
Obviously, hospitals play an incredibly important role within the National Health Service and the healthcare ecosystem. I just wonder, what's your relationship with hospitals? How does that work?
I've been in branch for about a year now, so I'm not one of the longest standing members, but generally the relationship is good and getting better. I mean, as I say, they can be wary first when you say you're launching an investigation, but as we're not apportioning blame, we're not apportioning liability. We don't mention the trust. That doesn't make it into the final reports. We always just use the reference event as an example and don't identify them. So they're often quite keen on that. And so, some of the cases, as I say, themselves have come in from the trusts themselves going, look, we've done a local investigation on this. We think this is an issue, but can you come in and help us maybe raise the profile of it, or have a look at what we've done and see if there's anything else we've missed, kind of thing. Or, you know what, guys, we think this is important enough for you to come in and to be able to address it nationally. So generally, yeah, the hospitals are, I mean, obviously they're working under a massive amount of strain at the moment. So, getting in there and getting to be able to interview staff, because we do like to go and see people face to face. Obviously, it really helps building up that relationship, but it can be quite difficult to get into hospitals. But generally, once we explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, they are very supportive. They'll get time for you to speak to the staff. You'll get time to go in and observe procedures or whatever that's relevant to you. They will provide you with the policies and things that they were working to. They're often quite just as keen as we are to get to, not to the bottom of something, but to understand why things happened and how that improvement can be done. And if we're just even if we're just a pair of fresh eyes on it, from an outsider's point of, from somebody from the outside's point of view looking in, and starting to question these things, then they are really helpful. It is almost a change of culture. I mean, this is one of the reasons probably that HSIB was set up after Airing's accident investigation started, and people started to understand how the system had been a part of the actual accidents coming to a fore. That just culture, that learning culture, very much changed within aviation. And I think the hope is that healthcare will do that as well. There's still a lot of professional responsibility placed on the individual, and we're expecting more and more of our healthcare practitioners. But we have to understand that they are fallible. They are working in a system that maybe doesn't provide them with the best resources available and things like that. So this is where I think standards definitely come into approach. I mean, I've come from aviation. I've come from defence aviation, so military fast jets, where it is standardised. It is very much you design a button to look like this, and this button always means this, or this colour always means this, because it is so safety critical that when people are under stress and under strain, you provide them with information presented in an easy to understand way. So there's lots of stuff like that is not necessarily new to the system, but is filtering in through the studies of human factors and safety science and things like that.
Now, talking of standards, you mentioned standards and BSI. I just wonder could you describe the relationship between HSIB and BSI?
It's a good relationship. It's useful. One of the things we try and do at HSIB, in fact, we do a lot, is we don't just send recommendations out into the system. We discuss them with the stakeholders first. There's no point us writing recommendations if they're not going to go anywhere or they could never be achieved. So one of the things we like to do is build up that relationship with the stakeholders so that we can talk to the people beforehand who will be on the receiving end of the recommendations, to be able to go, look, this is what's happened, this is what we're thinking, we're interested in this particular area, we'd like to be able to work with you to get this implemented within the system. So that's very much where we've been talking to BSI, and we've made recommendations to BSI in the past from a number of our reports. But that's not, as I say, just us shooting from the hip out into the system. That's with close conversations with yourself and colleagues about, how could we do this? How can we influence this? What's the best way to go and to approach this? So yeah, it's good. It's really great to be able to have those relationships and be upfront at the start of one of our investigations and going, we're starting to see an issue here. Is this something you could help us with? So as I say, it's not a surprise at the end that these recommendations are made. And, as an institution, you're there ready to receive them.
So as you talk there about the relationship with BSI and a sort of being on hand to help with your work, I just wonder, have you got examples of how you've worked with BSI to help improve patient safety through standards?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the cases we did a couple of years ago, before my time, but nasogastric feeding tubes, and how some of the elements around that and pH testing weren't particularly standardised. So we made recommendations into BSI for that. At the moment, we're in discussions with issues relating to packaging and labelling, and how to standardise that, and how to make sure that, you know, when people are picking things up from the storeroom, they know they've got the right thing. Similar ones as well, looking at standardization of icons and examples on that. So on packaging or in wards, you know, there is a standard there. I think we realize healthcare as a system is quite unstandardized. You know, within the trusts, they will potentially all do it different ways. And when I go out and speak to people, you know, they will say, "Oh, we didn't call it this in my old trust," or "We didn't cause," or, you know, "We didn't have this particular brand in my old trust." So people are having to chop and change quite a lot, because of the different things on the market, which I think is where the BSI, and that's generally what we come and talk to you guys about, is how do we standardize this? How do we know? So if you're moving from ward to ward or trust to trust, that the information you need is still there, that you can still use things, and that it is standardized across a lot more. So it's a lot easier to generalize. You don't want people to have to learn new things every time they go somewhere, you know. And if some of the information is in conflict, if it's red in one trust and green in another trust, you know, it's not consistent. And that's where BSI can really help us with getting those standards in place to try and at least standardize some elements of healthcare.
So, Suzy, you've talked about some of the sort of previous work that you've been involved with. I just wonder sort of what's currently taking up your time, and also what, you know, looking at future investigations down the line.
Yeah, so it never ends. Obviously, there's loads of investigations that are coming up, and people can go and look on our website. We've got on the website, we've published the reports that we've completed, but also when we launch a new investigation after we've done the original, you know, 3 months investigation, we're going to go to national. Then we start to put information on our website that people can sign up. So there's a couple of new ones launched at the moment. So a couple relating to patients with sickle cell disease. So there's some cases on that. There's some other ones which are more mental health focused. You know, we do really cover a broad spectrum of things. And I think that helps with our multidisciplinary team, as it were. There's people who've been in the system who understand, you know, what it is like to work in the NHS. There's people who understand the psychology and the human factors, and there's people who understand, you know, the basic engineering of a lot of these things as well. So we can, you know, really pull all that together in all the different reports. So yeah, lots of stuff going on, lots more reports to come, and hopefully, as I say, a lot more of these national learning reports as well. Now we've got 5 years of reports, you know, that we can go back and look over, and we're starting to, you know, do more information and more analysis of those to see those themes that are coming out time and time again.
So, in terms of, obviously, we're producing this episode around World Patient Safety Day, and you've talked about the issue of patient safety. It's the heart of what you do. But I suppose, is there more to it than that? I mean, obviously, there's the people involved in delivering the healthcare too.
Well, exactly. And a lot of the focus is on patient safety, but I don't think you can get to a place of patient safety without necessarily considering the well-being of the staff involved in the system. You know, it's often a thankless task, and, you know, it's hard work, and, you know, we know the staffing levels aren't what they should be in the NHS, and people are working long hours, and it's about understanding that and, you know, doing what we can to help the well-being of the staff. I spoke to a doctor a while ago, and he said, "I wish you could just follow me around the ward just to see what other things are going on that make my life, you know, a little bit more difficult." So he gave me an example of going to try and print something out, because there's some, you know, some records are electronic, some are on paper, and he was trying to print something out, but there was no paper in the printer. So he went to a different ward, and then the printer was in an entirely different place and had a different entire setup. And it's those kind of things that you go, actually, that is, you know, time wasted when, you know, we could have just designed around the user a lot better in the first place, going, do you know what, doctors are probably going from ward to ward. Wouldn't it be great if they were a bit more standardized, or, you know, the information was a bit more standardized, the layout was a bit more standardized, all those kind of things that we could really start to do more proactively, you know, as opposed to just waiting for incidents to happen and then react and change things. Could we start to look more proactively at how to help design things so that we consider the staff who have to work within that system, as well as the patients.
Do you want to know more about the role and purpose of standards in the modern world? Then BSI's free online course, The Power of Standards, is for you. Through its 3 modules, you'll learn about what standards are, why organizations use them, how they are made, and how and why people get involved in standards making. The course is designed to last around 30 minutes, but you don't need to complete it all at once. You can stop at any point and restart again later when you're ready. To find out more, visit bsigroup.com/education.
Now, I wanted to pick up on the issues mentioned by Suzy that the HSIB identified as a result of their investigations. An approach that she beautifully described as attempting to discover the why done it rather than the who done it. So I did this with Lena Cordie-Bancroft from BSI. I asked her about some of the standard solutions to the problems Suzy posed, and in particular around the issues of packaging and labelling, and also the symbols or icons used to convey information about a patient or what treatment may or not be required for them, that critical bedside information. But of course, we started with standards journeys and her BSI role. And though, as she explains, she has only been with BSI for a relatively short time, this is just the latest stop on what has been a long-term and transatlantic love affair and relationship with standards.
Coming up on my 1-year anniversary, so it's gone by super fast. But I am sector lead for medical devices, which means I am in the healthcare sector, primarily focusing on medical devices, in vitro diagnostic devices, and looking at ensuring that BSI are supporting these key healthcare topics and initiatives through development of standards and other related materials, and also looking at the evolution of the healthcare landscape to help prepare for what advancements are coming down in the future, and ensuring that BSI is out there at the front and able to address some of those topics and concerns to meet customer needs. But also in my role, I see myself as kind of a liaison between industry and BSI, and saying this is what industry needs, this is what our customers need, and making sure that we then have bringing their voice to BSI, and making sure that we've got the standards and the conversations to address those concerns, while so it's a two-way relationship, and I'm bringing what BSI has to the customer and what customers need to BSI.
Now, I want to pick up on, obviously, we're talking about one of those particular relationships as part of our conversation. Before we get there, on the podcast, we love a standards journey. So I'm interested in yours. How and when did it start for you, and where are you now?
Oh, geez. So it started back in early 2000s. 2004, I think, is when I actually got into medical device industry, knowing absolutely nothing about medical devices, but I had a really strong quality management, quality ethics, quality, that was a really strong part of the previous work I had done as project management. Anyway, as a part of a medical device company, I was invited to represent the company at some standards meetings at AAMI, Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation, which is the U.S. counterpart to BSI. And so I went to meetings and really had no idea what I was getting into, just kind of sat back and listened, and felt more and more like, whoa, I don't agree with some of this, or I have something to say, I have input, and I just couldn't help myself, and started contributing. And before I knew it, I was involved in a number of different committees. I was heavily involved in one standard in particular, which really kind of stood out for me. That was AMI ST90, which is Quality Systems for Device Reprocessing. And it was taking all of my quality management system experience with the ISO TC210 document, ISO 13485, which is the medical device quality systems standard, and really taking that and helping develop it for device reprocessing. During that same time, I also became involved in at the ISO level with the international standards representing representing the U.S. position at the international meetings. And I've been primarily involved in two standards technical committees. One is ISO TC 210, which is the quality management systems, symbols, labeling, and so on. And then ISO TC 198, which has to do with sterilization of devices. And it's everybody thinks, oh, standards work. That's incredibly boring. Well, it can be pedantic. Yes, extremely. We are all pedants in the medical in the standards world. But for me, it also became very personal. And whoever says that standards can't be romantic, they are completely wrong. Because through this journey of some 15 years in medical devices, I ended up meeting my current husband. So it was, and he's very involved in standards as well. And we've been in a number of committees and meetings together. And it brings a new level of engagement to our standards work. And I think other committee members quite enjoy our discourse, me being from the US, him being from the UK, having different opinions and different tactics that we need to come at for the topics. But now that I work with BSI, I am more on the UK side. So it's a really fun dynamic with our international friends and our standards community. So that's my personal bit.
This is the transatlantic relationship with standards. How about that? I've got to ask you. I mean, over the dinner table or breakfast table, how much conversation takes place around standards? I've got to know that.
Oh, a lot. I would say 75%. And some of it's fun and just like, oh, did you know this is going on? And yeah, there are a lot of standards that, and I don't even want to go into some of the topics because there's a number of strange topics, such as there's a new standard being developed related to sex toys and if they should be considered medical devices. And yeah, I just avoid that conversation as much as possible.
Well, now you've put it out there, I just wonder whether that has to be a future episode. But well, maybe I'll park that idea and I'll have a think about that one. Maybe we could come back to it.
Yes, and he tends to always bring this up in committee meetings and stuff, and I just sit there, roll my eyes, and everybody looks at me, and I'm like, yeah, okay, not good. Let's carry on.
Now, earlier we heard on this episode my conversation with Suzy. We heard Suzy's perspective about the relationship between her organisation, HSIB, and BSI. And earlier you mentioned about, as part of your role there, sort of developing relationships with stakeholders and with customers about the work that BSI does. But how would you describe from your perspective, what is the relationship between BSI and HSIB?
Yeah, so the organization HSIB and the BSI relationship with it is relatively new to me, because even though the relationship with BSI has been going on for quite a while, and I have been hearing about it, but never really knew what HSIB did, and strangely enough, within the span of 1 week, I was approached from two different committees at HSIB, asking questions. They've got these investigations and they wanted to see how BSI could, was there some way that BSI could contribute to their investigation, or was there a way that the use of standards could help standardize create a standardized process for industry to help minimize some of these safety concerns or address the concerns of healthcare providers. And so it was really interesting because I love, part of my background with quality systems and standards is risk management and corrective and preventive actions. This whole corrective action process of trying to, getting to the root cause analysis of what is an issue, what caused this problem, and then finding a way to address it, keep it from happening again. And when the HSIB teams came to me, I was like, wow, this, I get to use all my previous experience with this and see how can BSI address this. So it was really exciting for me to be engaged with this investigation to figure out how can we use standards to directly impact patient safety and prevent issues and concerns from healthcare providers or nurses or faculty or even medical device manufacturers and patients themselves with these issues.
So, Lena, I definitely want to dive into some of these practical examples of the relationship we have between HSIB and BSI. Before we do that, just give us some insight or a sense of, from the healthcare sector perspective. BSI gets involved in lots of healthcare standardisation. So, give us a sense of our relationships with stakeholders broadly in this space.
BSI has we work very closely with MHRA in the UK with the regulations and making sure that we have the appropriate standards to support the regulatory requirements and regulations of industry.
Clarifications Corner. The Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or the MHRA, regulates medicines, medical devices and blood components for transfusion in the UK. It's an executive agency of the UK Government Department of Health and Social Care.
And then from there, that also seeps into other jurisdictions as well. BSI being a notified body, we do need to have a very clear understanding of the directions that other medical device regulators are going in, such as the European Commission in the EU, the FDA in the US, at TGA in Australia. So being aware of what's going on, but our direct immediate impact is obviously with MHRA and making sure that we are addressing those regulatory needs here.
Clarifications Corner. The role of a notified body is to conduct a conformity assessment under the relevant EU directives and regulations. So, for medical devices, conformity assessment means the process demonstrating whether the requirements of the regulation relating to a medical device have been fulfilled.
That then seeps into work with the various other departments within government related to healthcare, getting involved with NHS, making sure that that we're not, the standards that we create and develop are not in conflict with some of the practices that they're promoting within their organizations. One big aspect of that is sustainability, and with all the NHS initiatives for that, BSI, we're making sure that we have the appropriate standards and supporting documents to help NHS as a stakeholder complete their initiatives.
So, Lena, then to the heart of this issue, really, we're looking in this episode about patient safety and looking at how standards can improve patient safety. In my conversation with Suzy, she mentioned HSIB getting involved in areas around packaging and labelling. So, could you tell us how BSI has approached that and what's been involved so far?
Yeah. So when Suzy and her team, they came to me regarding this specific issue, it was really, it's close to my heart because with standards, I am currently the convener of ISO TC 210 Working Group 3, which works on ISO 15223 Part 1, the standard for symbols, which are used on medical device labeling and packaging. So this issue happened to be with a device that a practitioner chose, wasn't sure about what size they needed, so had requested two to be pulled off the shelf, two different sizes. They came in, the packaging looks identical. There's no, other than the name of the device, everything else was the same, to be very consistent. That's one thing that we medical device manufacturers are good at, having that consistency, and we get the marketing aspects of it, and you have a brand that you want to make sure it is out there and present on the products. But what happened was, it was the difference between the two was so minor that it didn't get caught. And so what happened, the wrong product was pulled, not a different size, but a wrong product entirely. So the question was posed to me, what can BSI do? What standards are there that can support this? And immediately I'm thinking ISO 15223 Part 1, because we work on what symbols can we put onto packaging to help ensure that the correct information is being provided, that we're able to get as much information as possible without the use of text, of words, because these labels are used globally, and we really want to minimize all the translations that are taking place. So we use symbols as a representation of the information. And so I looked at the packaging that they sent, and I'm like, absolutely, I can see exactly where this would happen, because it is black and white. We don't, the use of color on packaging, medical device packaging, is not always supported, because colors in other jurisdictions can have different meanings. For example, if you use red, that may be a warning rather than signifying a specific use or a specific type of device. Also, the use of making sure that when a medical device manufacturer is creating their packaging and labeling, I said earlier, they want it to be consistent. They want to have this brand, this marketing piece, so that it's very clear that it's from their company. But by doing that, they limit they're impeding on the human factor side of the user that's really looking for those key differences that stand out. And so we were talking about, is there a way that we can, are there different symbols that we could use for this, to make sure that stands out? I don't know that that's necessarily appropriate for this particular case, because there are already other symbols to indicate size and differences in the product characteristics. But I mentioned the use of unique device identification, which is basically a barcode that you scan, and it brings up specific information, which is all great if the healthcare facility has the technology and the means to scan that. So yes, it's a great suggestion, and it could potentially help, but not specific. That's more of a global and not specific to this particular incident. There's another standard that ISO TC 210 works on, and this is in working group 2, and that's a new standard called ISO 20417. And this standard addresses information that needs to be provided on labeling and packaging. And so one of the proposals that we talked about was the possibility of, including in there that a description should be one of those required fields on a device package or labeling, to actually put a descriptor of what it is. That seems pretty basic, like, yeah, that should be there. But when you look through the different requirements, you have to have your product name, you have to have the product size, and a description isn't always included, because they could be very long and lengthy, or somebody could just think that it's not relevant and doesn't have much value added. So we're looking at the possibility of how can we use this kind of a descriptor and including that to make it stand out that this is when and how this device should be used. Not so much from a safety perspective, but from a differentiator. So a user can clearly see what the difference is between various products.
So is the first, with this particular need then from HSIB, is the sort of the approach that we take to look at where existing standards might be revised in order to incorporate that particular need? Is that the general approach that we take? And then if that can't be resolved, if the issue can't be resolved, then to look to develop brand new standards?
Correct. So it's ideally it would be to use a standard that's already developed that's already in use because it's known, and a lot of times in the case of 15223 Part 1, it's already a harmonized standard, so it can be used in the EU as a presumption of conformity. Looking at it, hopefully it will eventually be designated in the UK.
Clarifications Corner. Post-Brexit, new UK product regulation permits the UK government to designate standards for regulatory conformity purposes. This replaces the European Commission's citation of harmonised European standards in the official journal of the European Union. Where the UK government has designated a standard, its use confers on the product a legal advantage, usually a presumption of conformity with relevant aspects of the new UKCA product marking.
But the use of a existing standard, it's an easier route to getting the amendment or the change included into the standard. Sometimes though, a new standard is required if it's a very specific need, or it's a new idea, or it's there's enough content to address, to fill up a standard on just that one issue. We see this sometimes with, for example, the use of the creation of a standard for the use of phthalates, or to indicate that a device has phthalates in it. From a safety perspective, in an entire standard just for that topic. But the life cycle of standards is long. It takes a while 3-4 years to get a standard, developed and approved and adopted by a nation. So it's a long time to create that. So when possible, we try to revise as much as possible.
So in that particular example then around packaging and labelling, where are we in our conversations with HSIB?
We had, after the conversation with HSIB, they have submitted a draft report, which I am responding to this week, in fact, and then they submit their recommendations, and then it gets published on their website, and it gets sent to the various stakeholders, and then it's up to my understanding is then it's up to the stakeholders, the people that are mentioned in the report, to consider making these changes or recommendations. They provide the investigation and the lead up as to why these changes are required, and then it's left to stakeholders in industry to incorporate.
Hi, this is Cindy Parakill, just popping up here to say, if you want to make a difference and shape and change the world to make it a better and fairer place, then why not become a standards maker with BSI? Standards affect all of us every day, wherever we go, whatever we do. By defining good practice, they help people, organizations, the economy, and society to do things better. We have hundreds of committees working on thousands of standards, from artificial intelligence to zinc-enriched crops and everything in between, including medical devices and other forms of healthcare technology. We welcome applicants from all fields, backgrounds, and career stages. Our goal is simple: to have a balance of views around the standards-making table. So, start your standards-making journey now by visiting bsigroup.com/get involved.
So, Lena, another example that Suzy talked about was around the use of icons and sort of ward information. So, can you tell us about that? What's been the issue that HSIB has brought to us in order to tackle?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is another really interesting one, and it plays right into one of my favorite topics, which the symbols or icons for sharing information related to a device, or in this case, patient information. The case has to do with the identification of critical patient information while at the bedside or on the ward. In particular, a patient that has the do not attempt cardiopulmonary resuscitation, so a DNA CPR designation. There's no clear indication currently to identify who those patients are. It's in their chart, it's in their paperwork, but human error, right? You can get it mixed up, and that's exactly what happened in this case. One patient was identified as do not attempt CPR. The patient in the bed next to them did not have that designation, and the wires got crossed, and so the CPR was not attempted when it should have been. Fortunately, it was resolved rather quickly, and the patient was fine, but it brought wow, this is an issue. This could happen, and it may not always end up in with these kind of results. So what can be done to ensure that people, our healthcare practitioners, people on the ward who are very busy, have all these different patient requirements and needs going on? How can we make it easier for them to identify? And so we've discussed this, the possibility of developing a new symbol that could be used on the patient's healthcare record, maybe on their wristband, to identify when CPR should not be attempted. It seems like a very, very basic solution, but if you're not working on these kinds of problems every day, you don't realize, wow, yeah, that other people are not thinking about them. So you need to, it seems basic, but then we get into the whole, what kind of symbol do we need? How do we develop the symbol? And making sure that it has the same meaning and level of understanding globally, not just within the English speaking.
I was about to say that, yes, because obviously we're developing. You've mentioned lots of ISO standards, as international approach to these problems. I suppose that is the challenge, isn't it? Finding something that literally can be standardized and could be easily communicated and understood instantly because of the implications for patient safety and well-being.
That's absolutely it. And so we have to go through, when we develop a symbol, we do go through a validation process. We send it out to a wide demographic of people within healthcare. It could be nurses, doctors. It could be people, depending on where that symbol is meant to be used. It could be within a sterile processing area. Anyway, and among all many different languages as well. And make sure that these symbols can be readily identified. And we usually give a range. So we give maybe 3 or 4 different variations of a symbol, and then they rate them, and we decide which version scores most highly in conveying the message that we need that symbol to give. And then we go through a series of testing, another series of testing, and balloting with the different nations. But it's, we don't think about this sometimes, when the fact that in the English language, our letters don't mean anything, for example, in the Arabic countries, or when we're talking about China or Japan. They've got a very different system for spelling in their words and their letters. So we have to make sure that we're not using anything that could be in any way misleading or insulting, in fact, or disrespectful to their culture. So for example, on some symbols you'll see a plus sign, like the Red Cross, but we have to be able to have the ability to modify that if there's another symbol that should be preferred, so it doesn't become too religious.
No, I was fascinated that sort of listened to you there about the sort of cultural acceptance of a particular symbol or cultural appropriateness of that particular symbol. It's got to work everywhere, and as you say, convey that meaning instantly and in the right way, so that the practitioner can act accordingly. I just wonder, where are we with this particular issue? Will this be a revision of a standard or a new standard? Where are we with it?
Yeah, so this particular one, it's going to be, I'm going to bring it to the ISO TC 210 Working Group 3 committee to see if we can create a symbol to put into the existing standard, because there are potential uses for it, beyond just the patient, the bedside. There's a patient implant cards, PIC, which is a new requirement out of the European medical device regulation, but we're also seeing it in the MHRA consultation for the UK regs that's coming in. And this is a card that, if you have an implant, the doctor, the surgeon will give it to you as a patient, then this is what was implanted in you. And there are different symbols that are used on that. And this could potentially be one of those symbols that's included on this patient implant card that they carry with them. So we'll be in the process of, we've got some meetings coming up for the working group, and we'll be talking about this as a potential proposal. But like I said earlier, HSIB is an English, an organization here in the UK, and focused on addressing patient safety issues within the NHS and so on. So any kind of a solution we come up with would have to be global. So it's a really it's not something that we can take lightly and just assume, oh yes, this will work. We do need to go through and test and make sure that there's buy-in and acceptance globally for these kinds of solutions.
Lena, they talked there about, you've been describing, actually, this is the relationship with HSIB hasn't been that long because the organisation hasn't been around for that long, and investigating issues around public safety, looking for, as Suzy described, sort of generic solutions that can be applied across the entire healthcare system. But I wonder, we talked to lots of stakeholders about their involvement in standards because they can influence the world around them and shape their professional practice and shape the sectors in which they work. So I suppose, provocatively, why isn't HSIB just part of our committee member structure?
That's a really good question. I think, well, when I look at HSIB, they have, the people who are working on the investigations are not always medical professionals. They may not have a medical device background. They've got people coming in from aeronautics, from engineering, from automotives, from all different industries, and working on these investigations. And the investigations are also not always healthcare or medical device related. It's about safety, of people from many different situations. But I think what is important is that if the investigators bring a different perspective to looking at what that issue is. And so being actively involved in all of the committees may not be ideal, but when there's an issue that comes up, I think it would be great to have HSIB as an observer or a guest speaker, or to come in and be involved from the standards to present, here is the issue and this is what they've found. So then the standards committee itself can explore and look at it from okay, how can this be addressed more globally? What's the wider appeal to it, or does this happen has this happened before in other jurisdictions or other countries, and what solutions are out there? So it would be great if they were involved, but it might be the what they would be able to influence and what they would be able to provide may be very limited to a specific investigation rather than a standard in a whole.
So what you're describing there, Lena, is you sort of described a really interesting relationship with this particular stakeholder. HSIB has a particular role within the NHS within England, and it's looking to identify, look at solutions for sort of broad problems. And they've coming to us as a standards body to say, how can you help us? So I just wonder whether, within your work within the healthcare sector, in particular around medical devices, is this a unique relationship with the stakeholder that we have here?
I think it is. I think it is a very unique one because HSIB has identified these areas of concern or issues, and they're not pointing blame or laying blame or anything on any of the players within the investigation, but they're bringing it to light so that the wider industry or the BSI or the healthcare can look at some broad solutions. So they're bringing these to us to look at. And I think that's really important as a standards organization so that we can look at the impact of the standards work that we do. We're getting some external feedback and evidence of where there's maybe some gaps in the standards work, and then being able to address that proactively within the standards before, typically these investigations are not, they're varying degree, I suppose, of severity and concern, but it's looking at it while these incidents have already happened. They're addressing it proactively to prevent them from happening again, but also bringing in the right people so you can see what the more global issue is, and how are we able to address that from a number of different perspectives. For BSI, it just happens to be with the use of standards, but if they take it to NHS, it could be, maybe there's an actual procedure that they can do, or organizational change that needs to be made. And I think because HSIB is made up of a diverse number of investigators with lots of different backgrounds, they're able to look at the situations with a different set of eyes and see through some of those barriers that people who are close to the situation or close to the standard or the device or the problem itself. They see it in a way that we aren't able to see it, and that really brings us it just brings in more opportunities for a more holistic solution.
I think Suzy described it as their investigation as a why done it rather than a who done it. And I think you've just sort of reinforced that there, that
Yep.
looking at a particular incident and then actually investigating what it may have happened elsewhere in different trusts or in different hospitals or different service providers, and then thinking, okay, what are the large scale solutions here, of which standards are an important part. They may be the only solution thought of, or it could be sits alongside other policies and practices and regulations, maybe, to make sure that to as great a degree as possible, these situations or occurrences don't happen again. Would that be a fair assessment?
I do think that is fair, and we have to think about this as like a big spider web, right? You don't have just one strand alone that's going to keep the ecosystem strong and it's going to be safe and effective. We have to have everything working together, and standards are just a part of it. Regulations are another part. The medical device manufacturers and their requirements, what the needs of the NHS, the healthcare institutions, or even the patients themselves, depending on what if they've got specific needs, whether they know about them or not, or their own their own fears, their requirements, and it all creates this web of need, and patient safety is obviously at the center of that, and all these different bits affect that core belief that, or the core goal of providing the best care and patient safety as possible, which sometimes it's not 100%, but that's what we can strive for. But I like to look at it as everybody's working together, like creating that web effect in order to make the strongest ecosystem possible.
I just wonder, Lena, as a final thought, really, you described a really sort of an emerging and growing relationship with HSIB in this particular issue around medical devices. I just wonder, how important, are medical device standards broadly? I mean, they're out there shaping and influencing healthcare provision, but I just wonder how important standards are for this area of work.
Oh, standards are, yeah, well, being a standards professional, I guess, and I love standards. I'm very passionate about the use of standards. And I think that they are uh, integral to patient safety, whether it's well, to human safety, earth safety, everything, so that we've got a core, the standards set the minimum requirement for what's needed. So we know that we can always strive for better quality. We can strive for a safer device, but this is just the minimum based on the information, the technology, the testing that we have at the time that standard is written. So you have to think of, when we talk about state of the art, for example, that is, it's different for an engineer rather than a regulator, because regulators are looking at it from what we already know and what's already approved. And we've got these big thinkers that are looking forward to state of the art, as in the stuff that we're only starting to think of. And standards have to be used in a way that does not inhibit that innovation, but is based on what we have already experienced and what we already know. So trying to kind of rein in those huge thinkers, right, and loosen the reins on the people that are much more rigid in their thinking and don't maybe want to be innovative. And standards helps by kind of level setting and saying, okay, these are the minimum requirements. These are the concerns. This is what we need to think about going forward. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this areas. Some of the areas that we're going to see a lot more development in standards going forward is going to be the world of artificial intelligence, machine learning, because that's going to have a huge impact on patient safety. And how devices are being, not only how they're being developed and designed, but how they're being implemented and used. And then also sustainability, because any changes that need to be made to a device in order to help meet the sustainability goals and initiatives will have an impact on patient safety as well, because they'll require changes or modifications to the existing device or what we know is a safe and effective device. So standards are fundamental there. It's not going to solve all the world's problems related to patient safety, but it's helping kind of create that fundamental platform for manufacturers, healthcare organizers, people to work off of in order to build stronger and better systems.
So my thanks to Suzy Broadbent from the Healthcare Safety Investigation Branch and Lena Cordie-Bancroft from BSI for talking to me for this episode of The Standards Show. To find out more about some of the issues we talked about, including the work of the HSIB and the relationship between healthcare, medical devices and standards, then check out the links in the show notes.
You have been listening to an episode of The Standards Show with Matthew Childs and Cindy Parakill. Subscribe to us now wherever you get your podcasts.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.